So G2 lost their spot in the partnerships. Carlos has lost his spot on G2 as well. Bren's point when they brought this up on Platch of Valorant was that Riot need to be extremely serious about things like this because they have a history and a culture of misogyny, sexual harassment, and discrimination. They had a $100 million lawsuit about it as well. So they can't just ignore or brush under the rug people that are friends with, supporting, platforming, whatever word you want to use there, legitimizing deeply problematic people there. So, but I think when I was listening to the Platch of Valorant conversation about this, I think it missed something because to me this entire situation rubbed me the wrong way. I got the same impression from this situation as I did from the. It's going to sound weird, but from the whole turret bug ruling incident, which was, I think it only happened because of the timing. I don't think it happened because of what happened, and that annoys me. So I want to go through it. So first of all, Tate, what a wanker. Not just a history of espousing disgusting stuff about women being property, etc., etc. Talks about how his job was to manipulate women into joining the sex industry for his own gain. Started a fucking multi-level marketing scheme trying to teach young men how to be misogynistic. Has admitted to he admitted to moving to Romania because he said the police investigate sexual assaults less over there. He's been accused of rape, under investigation for human trafficking. I mean, just a fucking entire gambit of awful person. Right? Entire gambit. And then you have a video of Carlos, and Carlos is the brand for G2. He's the face of it. He is the brand of it. And the quote on the tweet as well, that was the video, said, yesterday we celebrated G2's World Championship. And that then brings the organization into the video too, right? It's not just Carlos tweeting, hey, look at me at a party. Because I don't see how anyone could require consequences for that, right? Anyone could be at a party with somebody who's a fucking idiot. You know, you take a video like, hey, this dickhead's here, whatever. But the fact that he's saying we, the group that were involved, celebrated G2, the organization that you work for, makes it a business-related video. Carlos isn't stupid. He's got to know how volatile of a person Tate is and how volatile the reactions are going to be to that. It's just from a business perspective, terrible optics. And he's got to have known it. It was either on the most generous end of it, oh, he's trying to do a cheeky, edgy tweet like Carlos often does. But if that was the case, there was never any reason to try and double down on it. You could have just easily backed out without any harm being done. Or it was just more serious. And I think that's really important when you come down to considering brand risk from a business point of view. Because he took a risk posting the video to begin with. I guess he takes a risk going to the party in the first place and hanging out with those people. But then he takes a bigger risk by putting the video out there. And then when given the choice to back off from it, he doubled down and amplified the risk. So even if you were just using this as an example of whether or not he's going to be a good business partner to commit to long term, you can use this as a case study and be like, when he gets into trouble, he just fucking doubles down and exacerbates the situation. So even if you don't think that the specific situation is enough to have Riot think about whether or not they want to continue with G2, you can extrapolate it to other scenarios that might come up over the course of being a partner and think, how would he act in those situations? He'd probably double down and make things worse rather than making things better and smoother. So, everyone's going to make some fuck-ups, whether they're enormous or whether they're small. And if you wanted to be super generous and you were just like, oh, it was just a party with him, obviously that doesn't appear to be the case. But if you wanted to be really generous, then there were ways of being able to make that clear, and he didn't go down that route at all. So, but the doubling down happened immediately, right? He instantly was not even in terms of what he tweeted, but he was liking replies to that initial tweet. Because immediately the community comes out and is extremely vocal, judging him for partying with the Tate brothers, which they should be. That is just the way that social interactions work. If you say, hey, I'm friends with this person, other people are free to judge you because who you spend a lot... It's not who you spend a lot of time with necessarily. It's who you choose to spend your free time with. You have free time. Who do you enjoy spending it with? I enjoy spending it with these people. That reflects upon you. It doesn't necessarily reflect as much if it's like someone you're forced to work with or forced to spend too much time with. But when it's your free time that you're spending in an enjoyable manner, that is obviously going to invite judgment there. So he went through liking some replies, and I've just got some replies because I want to showcase the kind of things that he was liking. And the problem with liking stuff is that it in itself means essentially nothing, right? You have to try and add some meaning to it. Like, does he agree with this? Does he agree with some portion of this? Why did he choose this response to like, etc.? But I just want to read out the kind of things, right? So one of the replies that he liked was, so Carlos was partying with the Tate brothers. What do you want? You want Carlos to kill him? Judge him in the middle of a fucking party? What happened doesn't mean he supports Tate's statements or other shit. Let the man party. Jesus, fucking child's trying to cancel everything. So Carlos likes that one. And so when you see a tweet like that, getting liked by Carlos, you might think, oh, well, maybe the guy just did happen across him and he just thought it was funny to take a video instead of actually trying to, confront him in the middle of a party. I don't know about you. I wouldn't confront someone in the middle of a party that I don't know who it was. I would leave maybe, but I don't think I would start confronting somebody. So that's clearly not a reaction that people expect of people, or at least I hope it's not, because I fucking wouldn't do that. So, all right, you've got those tweets on one end of it. But then on the some of the other ends of things as well, he has like tweets where he's liking that are like, most adults have friends they disagree with, friends they wouldn't trust in certain situations due to poor morals, but otherwise hanging out with. Okay, again, so he's liking comments that are like implying that he's friends with them, even though he doesn't agree with what they say, etc., etc. But then he's also liking comments that are defending Tate and defending his character, defending what he's done. Things saying, I bet he's a better person than most of you guys in the comments. Like these kind of things. So it's not just... Even at this point, people were getting pissed off at the replies that he was engaging with because the replies were not implying that he was just, stumbled upon him at a party, implied that he was seriously a friend of Tate's. And then he posts a follow-up tweet saying, nobody will ever be able to police my friendships. I draw my line here. I party with whoever the fuck I want. For starters, a lot of people really liked this tweet because it's like, oh yeah, stand up for yourself against the fucking cancel culture, etc. But of course, people can police your friendships when you are, or not police your friendships, but there can be consequences for your public friendships via your business. I mean, obviously there can be. There are people that if you are friends with them, there would be dramatic consequences. So drawing the line there doesn't really mean anything from Carlos's point of view. It just means that he's not going to change his behavior. And the tweet implies that he is actually friends with Tate rather than just stumbled upon him at a bar as well. So I think the immediate public condemnation of Carlos is justified, right? People judge you for who you enjoy spending your free time with. But here's the issue that I have. I think the outcry for this tweet and for the follow-ups and stuff was proportional to how much people hate Andrew Tate, not how much harm they think Carlos actually did by partying with him. And I think that's quite an important distinction because the focus of vitriol was Carlos, was G2, was the sponsors of G2, that kind of thing. When the proportionality is based on how much you fucking hate the person that he's with. It's not that you hate Carlos that much. You might really disagree with Carlos spending time and legitimizing a friendship with somebody who's a hateful, horrible person. But the proportionality wasn't to how much people dislike that behavior. The proportionality was enormous and based on the harm that Tate himself has done. And so I think that's an important thing. So then you come to, was the reaction from from Riot, reasonable. And one of the other things that was mentioned in that Spanish interview that was talking about the G2 situation was that there were other things that Riot had not been happy with G2 before. G2, like I've been talking about during the rules discussion, G2 had a poaching problem in 2021. Carlos was talking about it in interviews that he, technically has to say that he hasn't poached people before, but he definitely has, and he thinks that everybody does it, and he thinks the rule is bad, and G2 themselves were accused of it by, I think it was Mad Lions or something. And also, it seems like Riot weren't particularly happy with the clause that stopped Perks from being able to go to Fnatic, which was G2's biggest rival at the time, because it limits the opportunities for players after the contract has already expired or been traded to somebody else. So there were other things rumbling beneath the surface by the sound of it, as to why this might have been the straw that broke the camel's back rather than the entire decision to remove G2 from partnerships was based on this situation. But I also think, again, that the response from Riot of removing G2 from the partnerships process is proportional to the community response, not necessarily proportional to the actions that Carlos, and certainly not proportional to the actions that G2 have taken. Because G2 as an organization themselves basically didn't have too much to do with this madness. They could have said, okay, we're going to fire Carlos, and we didn't know that this party was going on. This is our CEO acting independently, etc., etc. So G2 themselves have not, as far as I'm aware, organized a fucking work party and invited the Tates to it with a fucking G2 headed letter or something like that. It's the actions of Carlos, and the Riot response seems proportional to the community reaction rather than the actions that G2 are responsible for in this situation. And I think that's the main gripe that I have with this entire thing, and one that Wyatt as well brought up when Clash of Valorant was going on, which is, where is the line here in terms of what Riot defines as something that's acceptable for partners to do and something that they think is unacceptable for partners to do. And I would go even further than what Wyatt was saying, which Wyatt was saying the line seems like it's all over the place. I would agree. I would say there isn't even a line. There literally isn't a line. I don't think Riot has demonstrated that they care at all about deselecting partners who cause harm. I think it seems to be that it's all based on what Riot thinks they and their partners can or can't get away with in the public eye. It seems to all be based on the perception of what the community response is going to be. And that is a really bad way of running a system, because it's not based on the actions that you commit. It's based on the response from the public. And I think that is my biggest issue with this. In essence, right, the point being, is this actually a case of Riot acting to make their partnership system better, safer, and getting rid of bad actors, and moving their products, moving Riot away from the culture of misogyny and sexual misconduct? Is that the case? Is it really that? Or is it just a performative act because everybody was paying attention to it? And to me, it strikes me as a very performative act, because the actions that Carlos has taken are really quite small in the grand scheme of things. He's partied with and defended a horrendous person. Not gonna take away from that. For G2, their actions are even smaller, but there are massively worse actors within the space, some that made partnerships and some that made partnerships that are with other bad actors in the space. And that's what I don't get. There doesn't seem to be a line. It just all seems to be based on the community perception to things, not based on actually any level of values for partners to hold. So, for example, let's make the comparison to Sentinels with Sinatra. There are, and not even just Sentinels, there are just a ton of pro players who post photos with Sinatra, have defended him, queue with him, stream with him, publicly, privately, etc. The public outcry doesn't exist for that behavior, though, at all, despite it being somewhat similar, and so it just continues without any response. There is a toxicity thing in the roster rules which presumably would prohibit Sinatra from taking part in 2023. But that's not what we're discussing here. We're not saying that Carlos himself was a horrendous person. We're saying that Carlos was friends with and defended a horrendous person. That's also the case for an outrageous amount of pro players currently too. But that doesn't appear to be the line there in the slightest, and no attempt even to make that behavior that's discouraged when they are quite similar situations. And if you think that comparison's unfair, there are way worse entities than individuals who've committed horrible things acting in esports. And this is where we go down the path that you always see the Monte Cristo and Richard Lewis and stuff go down, which is that the governmental people from Saudi, from China, etc., who let's start here. Evil geniuses, Fnatic, Na'Vi, 100 Thieves, Vitality, Liquid. They're all business partners, literally, with the Saudi government via their ownership stakes in the ESL Pro League, right? ESL is owned by the Savvy Gaming Group, which is themselves owned by the Saudi's Public Investment Fund. The chairman of that public investment fund is MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, right? It doesn't get much more direct to that as you go just direct to a major source of fucking evil in esports, right? Hello, editor Sideshow here, because I need to make a correction to this and apologize to 100 Thieves, because they shouldn't have been listed in the group of teams there whatsoever. They were one of the original 13 teams that was part of the ESL Pro League, but they got rid of their spot when they got rid of their CSGO team a couple of years ago, and that was before ESL were in bed at all with the Savvy Gaming Group and with the Public Investment Fund. It's actually Furia is the partnership team for Valorant that I should have put into that list instead of 100 Thieves. So again, apologies to 100 Thieves for implicating you in that involvement there. It's the rest of the teams that I listed, and Furia instead are the teams involved in the partnership system in Valorant who are still in that relationship with ESL, who themselves are owned by the Savvy Gaming Group and the Public Investment Fund. So apologies for that, but correction in the YouTube video, which I wasn't able to do during the live stream. And the entire purpose of the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, is to take the Saudi economy away from being dependent on oil, which about 30 to 40% of it's dependent on oil at the moment, and push it towards other ventures. So it's literally designed, this fund, to perpetuate the Saudis' appalling system, even if the oil money runs dry. And then the second purpose is to sports wash their human rights record and make the Saudi regime seem less terrible by associating with things that you enjoy, with things that you love, right? It's sports washing. It's very classic. And the reason that this is relevant is because what we're talking about here is a team that was looking for partnerships being involved tangentially with somebody awful, right? The team itself, Carlos itself, was not accused of sexual harassment, misconduct, beating women, sex trafficking, etc. Those crimes are on the person that he hung out with and defended, which itself, again, you should be judging him for that, and there should be consequences for that. But the proportionality is somewhat similar, or should be somewhat similar here, compared to these, a whole fifth of the teams in terms of Riot's partnership here are involved with a large esports venture that is under the direct watchful eye of the leader of the Saudi regime. I mean, that is fucking relevant to the discussion. And again, Sentinels, another team outside of that, have been salarying an accused rapist for a year and a half after compelling evidence came to light. They've just kept him on the salary the entire time. Hello? Why there is no line. The line, it doesn't exist. It's not that there is a line and it moves up and down and all over the place. There's no line. It's all just based on what the community is getting angry about. And that is a terrible way to run things, because there are much better, more moralistic ways of running things where you try to actually push the harm out of the scene instead of just what people are angry about out of the scene. For example, here's another example. Liquid, they're owned by an organization called Axiomatic. One of their investors has at least 10 women who've accused him of sexual misconduct. Tony Robbins, a guy that used to do fucking self-help seminars in the past. Maybe he still does as well. The There's no line. There's no line at all. It's purely performative. And then you have other things that are infractions that aren't as serious as what I'm talking about here, but they are more relevant to esports, right, as well. And these are teams that also made it into partnerships. Like, for example, MIBR's parent organization, the Immortals Gaming Club, have just made it seem like they don't give a fuck about esports. Ruined their spot in Overwatch League. Awful performances every time in League of Legends. Just specifically, if we go back to Overwatch League, ruining their spot in Overwatch League and fucking with player careers, it's not on the same level of harm as the other things are, like the Saudi regime, like sex trafficking, like blatant teaching other people how to be misogynistic, like rape accusations, that kind of stuff. It's not on the same level of harm, but it's much more specific to the partnerships program. Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference at MIBR. And then here again, we're decreasing in terms of the problematic nature of this, but I just want to keep reiterating the point that there doesn't seem to be a line. There were rumors and reports circulating that Ascend, one of the big reasons that they didn't make it in, was due to their funding being from gambling, right? I'm sure you've all heard this because people were talking about it all over the place, though it hasn't really been like narrowed down to a report that you could stick your finger on. It was mostly just rumors. But the Ascend's funding, from what I can see, is from poker coaching. It's from coaching people how to play poker. It's not from fucking ruining people's lives by trying to persuade them to gamble on the horses or fucking slot machines or something. It's from teaching. It is from teaching people how to play the skill-based and some luck-based game of poker. But apparently, it's hard to say that the line was there because there is no concrete report that was the cause, but there were rumors that was the cause. Meanwhile, Navi's fucking main partner is GGBet, and their CS team had a betting fraud incident, which as far as I can tell was never investigated properly, when Navi's players decided to buy, what's the name of the gun in CS, the MG249 or something, because someone had tweeted at them that they had an outrageous bet going on with it, and the betting site was a fucking partner of their company as well. Just an absurd situation. Again, well, don't worry about that. No problem. No problem. One of Liquid's co-owners is also a pro poker player as well, but I wouldn't want that to be punished. I don't think the Ascend thing should have been over the line either. Maybe it only matters how much of the money's coming through the revenue source. Maybe there's no reason whatsoever. I don't get it. So to summarize the rant, my point from this is that the reaction from Riot seems proportional to the reaction of people online, not proportional to the actions taken and the harm done, right? Ideally, you try to design a system where your disciplinary action or who you choose to work with is dictated by the actual harm that's been done or could be done, not how much people get annoyed by the harm that's done. And furthermore, the reaction from people online seems proportional to, how much they've heard of the situation. Everybody's heard of Andrew Tate. I mean, I hadn't, so maybe that's a bit stupid, but he's an extremely infamous figure on the internet within recent times. I'd heard of him, though I didn't know about him. And I'm really glad that the response was very instant, very negative towards Tate being involved in an esports celebration. But I think the response there is driven by it being a singular person with notoriety who clearly states that they're a terrible person frequently, and they act like a terrible person, and they provide nothing of value for the esports audience. The same reaction is just not present for other figures or entities that have done similar things or far worse things, partly because they tend to be groups of people, of which some are good and some are bad, and there's a human desire not to get the innocent mixed up with the guilty, I think. Partly because those terrible actions, I think, are disguised behind layers of abstraction as well, right? It's kind of like the difference between tweeting, "women are property," and then the difference between that and systematically holding back career progress of women at a company. Right? They're both causing serious harm, but the second one is a bit more difficult to put your finger on because it's a lot of small things added up all together. Again, it's like the difference between earning money by manipulating women into the sex industry or the difference between that and paying people salaries by spending money that you got from running a regime where women are literally second-class citizens. Right? The first one, very obvious. You can point to it and say, that is fucking awful. The second one has a couple of layers of abstraction where you're like, obviously the regime itself, horrendous. But after it trickles down and you end up paying the salaries of a person I really like, that is difficult to point your finger to and go, paying this person a salary from this source is as horrendous. It doesn't get the same reaction, and so it's not getting the same response as well. And I think partly because there's also value being provided from these people or entities, right? Some of the people make you laugh, or they're good at a game, or they make the game that you enjoy, something like that. And we've already talked about the people that make the game, which is, Riot themselves, who've had this culture of misogyny, and I think that's part of the reason why they need to be making the right moves here in terms of actually moving their partnership system away from harm and towards people that are going to minimize that or do really helpful things for the community. So it does seem a bit extraordinary to me that G2 caused enough trouble to be booted from the entire partnership system for tangential association, because that's what it is. Carlos has close association potentially, but G2 itself has tangential association with one obviously blatant personification of misogyny. When that exists to a much higher level throughout the whole industry. You've got G2, a team that's supported women in gaming, has currently the best team in Game Changers as well, with a CEO who appears to everybody that's interacted with him to be doing good within esports, but the CEO is friends with people outside of the esports space who've done horrendous things, and they will keep doing horrendous things. Obviously, there you've got a bit of a clash, but on the other hand, you've got bad actors who are already in the space. I mean, Tate's on the outside, interacting with somebody inside. There are already fucking bad actors inside here, running it, funding it, and there isn't the same level of community pressure to affect the bottom line. And the bottom line only seems to be affected by that community pressure instead of by an actual desire to change. There doesn't seem to be any internal desire to change unless it's forced from the outside, and the outside forces seem to be directed in kind of wishy-washy places. And I saw people being really sad for Exet, obviously, because they didn't make it in, and like sad for Nookie and Mixwell as well, who after this tweeted their LFT kind of tweets. But really, at the end of the day, G2 leaving only allowed another one of the North American teams a spot. So I don't think it's possible to say whether there were net losses of jobs within the Valorant space. We don't know if that replacement organization that joined after G2 left would have even stuck around in Tier 2, right? You don't know whether there's any net gain or loss of jobs there, or player jobs, that kind of thing. One organization lost an opportunity and another one gained it. It's hard to say whether there's really going to be any meaningful impact off the back of this change. Did it prevent any harm? Did it help in any way? It's pretty unclear, actually. But it did definitely affect the bottom line for G2 and for Carlos. He was put on leave, and then he's been presumably told to leave entirely, although I think they worded it officially as he stepped down. And he's no longer with G2. The org itself has lost a lot of their brand identity, and I think the esports space has also lost somebody that appears to have done far more good than harm over the course of their career, which can't be said for everybody that's involved with esports. But I think the biggest thing to take away from this entire situation is that the community has power, and community outrage has power. It is maybe the only thing that seems to be affecting whether or not change happens in the right or wrong direction. And that means that it's a community responsibility to ensure that the outrage gets directed towards the right places to enact meaningful change. And that to me is one of my biggest takeaways from this as well, is that if there is no line, if the line is purely determined based on what we as a community get angry about, then let's start trying to get angry about the important shit. Not that this wasn't, but this is somewhere, I think, in the middle. It's certainly not the most important stuff. It's not the least important either, but I think it's somewhere in the middle. So, I think it left me with a weird taste in my mouth, despite the fact that I, broadly speaking, agree. And I think that that's really important for me to clarify at the end here. Bren and Wyatt and stuff were talking on the podcast as well about this was the only decision for Riot. And I think I agree. North America is such a competitive region that there aren't really any problems with letting go of G2. It's not a major loss. And they made a major fuck up where their CEO indicated that that might be something he would continue to do in the future. Where I start to deviate is that I think this kind of thing, this kind of microscope should also probably be applied to other parties in the space as well. And to Riot themselves. And I think that that is something that doesn't really appear to be happening right now.